Get the gas pump number yourself and stop being a jerk to the lady. I'm not sure if this belongs here, so delete it if necessary. I'm not normally very confrontational with other customers when I'm out, but this one slipped out. I went to a nearby convenience store one evening a few years ago to get cigarettes for myself and my wife. I walk into the store and get in line behind an old grubby-looking guy with a bad attitude. The cashier asks him if she can help him. He says he wants to put some money on one of the pumps. She asks him which pump. He rudely replies, "I don't know. I don't work here." Maybe it was the years of dealing with rude customers in the food service and call center industries. But without even thinking, I blurt out, "Why don't you go outside and check instead of being a jerk to her?" Grumpy guy spins around, points at me and yells, "Mind your own business." I was a little dumbstruck, not because he yelled at me, but because I was still processing the fact that I spoke up for someone. To his credit, Grumpy guy sticks his head out the door, yells to one of his companions for the pump number, and returns to the counter and completes his transaction. When I get to the counter and notice both women behind the counter are staring at me, I don't know if they were scared of me, shocked that Grumpy guy was so rude to them, or shocked that someone had defended one of them from a rude customer. I do know that it felt good to put a jerk in his place. Edit. This post got a lot more attention and love than I expected. Thanks to everyone that replied and reacted.
Me? I don't work here. I need to find my dad. Lady, you do work here. You will help me. Okay, so my father and I went to Walmart to pick up a couple of things. I went off to the clothing section to pick out a couple of new tops. This lady comes out of nowhere, grabs my arm and proceeds to tell me I need to help her find some things. I think, okay, maybe she just needs another opinion. I do that and she starts dragging me around Walmart. I tell her I need to find my dad and she says, "Don't lie to me. I know you work here." I'm baffled. I'm not even wearing a uniform. I proceed to tell her that I don't in fact work there and she starts going off on me, saying she knows I do, and at this point my dad comes up and asks me what's taking so long. I tell him and he tells the lady the same thing. I do not work there. Okay, she doesn't believe my dad. We find a clerk. She'll have to believe someone who actually works there. Nope, not even believing the clerk. We had to get the manager in order to even get the lady to let me go.
Asian restaurant equals Asian workers, right? About a year ago, my dad and I were waiting in front of the host stand at a Mongolian BBQ. It was pretty busy, so we were waiting a while. As we are standing at the podium, another family walks in and is gathered at the entrance. A few minutes go by before the mom of the family walks up to my dad and goes, "Am I going to seat us? We have a party of 6. Mind you, my dad and I are both Asian, but we were clearly on the customer side of the host stand and were dressed very casually. My dad is caught off guard and doesn't know what to say. I'm trying my best not to bust out laughing, but I'm very much laughing at both of their faces. Immediately after the white, blonde hostess takes us to our table. We take one more look back, and Ms. Party of 6 looks like she just peed her pants. It was a delightful meal cooked by 4 Puerto Rican gentlemen.
Park and employee parking versus I'm not an employee. Not sure if this is the right sub. It sort of fits. I've been reading posts, and it reminded me of this. Hope you enjoy. I'm female and was 24 at the time. This happened over the course of a few weeks about 2 years ago. I was working as a construction design engineer for hospitals, plumbing and air conditioning. I worked for a company that's hired by the hospital, not for the hospital itself. My company had been hired to do an ER renovation on an old hospital, and the plans for the existing building were really old, damaged, or just didn't exist anymore. As low man on the totem pole, I got the fun job of going out to the hospital to document and investigate the existing building. Lots of going up on ladders and looking above the ceiling to track down pipes and ducts and such. Because this was an ER and therefore 24 hours per day, we had to tie our investigation for non-busy times, namely 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. in the middle of the week. I was also working my normal office hours. because my job offered overtime or in lieu hours, and I needed the overtime pay, college loans, lol. So for all these interactions, I was exhausted and just didn't give a shit. So on to the story. I had to park in the hospital parking garage on the top floor to be out of the way of patients and visitors. I had finished early because an emergency had come into the ER and I had to get out of the way. I had some extra time, so decided to close my eyes for a bit before driving to the office, when I was woken up by a tapping on my window. A man was peering in the window. We will call him Parking Dude PD. I waved at him thinking he was just making sure I was all right. I was sleeping in a hospital parking lot. PD gestured for me to roll down my window, so I cracked it to hear him better. He gruffly declared that employees are to park in the back lot or on the street if that's full. Next time I'll have you towed. He then turned and marched back to his golf cart, which he blocked me in with. As I called out, "I don't work here," he left. I left and went to work thinking it was a one-time deal. Little did I know. Over the next few visits, I came back to my car to find increasingly angry parking tickets. About parking and employee parking from now on. They were printed on foray and very obviously homemade, with a blurry hospital logo and word art parking enforcement across the top. The notes threatened booting, towing, and demands for my supervisor's names so I could be reported. I wish I still had them to share with you, my coworkers, and I had quite a laugh over them. I even left a note on my dash saying I wasn't an employee, and the next ticket had a rant about lying and that you will be written up for lying once I get your supervisor's name. Then one morning I came out to find PD waiting for me. He had blocked my car with his golf cart and was grinning at me like a cat who got the cream. I walked up to him and PD said employees have to park in the back lot. You are in so much trouble. I demand to speak to your manager. Yes, he really said it. Give me their name and number and the department you work for. I won't let you leave until you give me your manager's name. He did have my car blocked in. I tried to explain that I wasn't an employee. I pointed out my outfit: work boots, jeans, safety glasses, and a tool belt with flashlights, tape measures, lasers, and a clipboard with my drawn plans, and told him that this is where hospital admin had told us to park. But he insisted that my disguise wasn't going to trick him and demanded to speak to my manager. I was so exhausted and wasn't really up to arguing, so I just pulled out my business card and my boss's card and handed them over. I had told my boss about this, and he just told me to ignore it, as he had confirmed with the hospital that's where I was supposed to park. This dude pulled out his phone and called my boss and reported me. My boss, an older gentleman who was also president of the company, later told me he had told PD that he had to let me leave or he was calling the police. When the dude hung up, he told me, "I'm letting you leave this time, but next time you park here, I'll boot your car and find your real manager's number and report you. Some trick with your friend won't work." He got in his golf cart and zoomed away. Luckily, my boss found this whole thing hilarious. It was about a week before I went back. That winter equals busy or equals no work for me, and I was almost done with my task. I would be back after construction started, but it's all on hold now because of COVID. I had finished for the day once again and headed out to my car to find he had sort of done what he had threatened. There was a thick chain looped through the handle of my driver's side rear door and a cinder block all tied together with a large padlock. I knew this guy was a bit nutty, but I also had figured out he didn't have any real authority. So to find this half-clever, half-poorly thought-out ball and chain attached to my car was a bit of a surprise. Now I got into engineering because I like solving problems. I actually don't really like math even if I'm not half bad at it. And this wasn't a particularly complex problem. I simply rolled my back window down and lifted the cinder block and excess chain into my car, and then drove away. I passed PD on my way out. To say he was shocked was an understatement, and I gave him a jaunty wave as I drove by. It was a cold drive back to my office with the window open, but it was worth the look on his face. When I got to the office, I had to go in and sign out the bolt cutters, and was followed out by a parade of my coworkers to see it for themselves. I had to go back one more time. I was eager to see what PD might do after his last plan failed. I came out to find he had tried the chain and cinder blocked it again. This time he had wrapped the chain around the bottom of the wheel a few times, and had the cinder block tied pretty close to the wheel and the chain through the handle again. It was definitely chained in a way that would take a lot more ingenuity to get out of, or a pair of bolt cutters I hadn't returned to the office. You know, just in case. I cut through the chain and chained the car, and then loaded the whole lot into my trunk. PD must have been harassing some other person, because he only pulled up as I was backing out of the spot. He blocked my car, again with his cart, and jumped out. He came to my window and I did roll it down just to see what he had to say. Hey, where are the chains? How did you get loose? This is stealing. Is it stealing to take stuff he attached to my car? I will have your job for this. I never did hear the rest of the rant, as I yelled magic and I'm not an employee, during a pause for breath and drove around his cart and away. It was the most dramatic exit of my life and will probably never be topped. It was my last day there, for now, and I've since gotten a new car, so I'm not sure if I'll run into PD again. I like to think he is still puzzled over how I managed to unhand my car. My boss did lodge a complaint, but I don't think anything came of it. Anyway, that's my Don't Work Here story. Hope it was worth the read.
Did you recognize all of the voices? Leave your guesses in the comments.